Up next on Inside the SCCA, data digging with AIM Sports. Welcome to this episode of Inside the SCCA. I'm Brian Bielanski, trying to make sure I look all nice and fancy here. We're here talking some data digging. We're going to talk about data acquisition, data logging, how we can use it, how it's being used really interestingly within the SCCA right now in one particular class. And episode 170, I believe. I actually looked it up this time. Episode 170. And my guest tonight is Roger Caddell. Roger from AIM Sports. How you doing, Roger?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me, Brian.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. You are a West Coaster, so at least I'm not asking you to be up past your bedtime. And if I am, I apologize. You're coming to us from Washington State, the great state of Washington. You've watched the show a couple times, so you know what's coming. We ask the first-time guests the same first question every single time, and that is simply, how did you get mixed up in this crazy sport that we love?
Crazy sport of racing, right? My father lived in Southern California when as a high school student, and was in the hot rod scene in the 50s, and with the car club scene and the early drag racing, and so it came from a little bit from the family side, like it does for many, and then he moved us all up here to Washington State to kind of get out of a little bit of what he thought was the crazy amount of traffic and people down there, and look what it is now, right? But
fair enough.
But 55, 60 years later, we're here we are, and so we came up here, and then kind of got out of it a little bit, and then as I was getting up to age, to be 16 years old, and we kind of got into off-road racing. Dune buggies, some recreational stuff at first, and then it of course then rolls into motorsports, right? And so we started doing off-road racing from when I was 16 till gosh, for 20 straight years. I raced off-road cars, raced at a fairly high level. In fact, off-road racing is super big in Southern California, Southern Nevada, and so spent a lot of time going down there to race in the desert in Baja and the Mint 400 and those kind of events, plus short course stuff. So that was my driving, and then I quit driving, and gosh, it was a couple 2 or 3 years of no motorsports, other than I was working with doing some AIM data stuff, but only as a dealer, not for working for them. But then I had a son that was getting old enough, and he was got to the point where he maybe wanted to do a little bit of kart racing. Mm-hmm. So we got into karting, and then he got into we moved up into circle track oval, which was the Bandoleros and the Legends, which is the route we took, and did that for a couple of years, and then wanted to get into turning left and right. He really enjoyed the karting side of it, and so what we did is we went to the local races here at Pacific Raceways in Portland, just south of me, and we started to kind of look at the classes and what was available when he was 15, and with an eye towards doing something when he turned 16, and who knows which way we were going to go, but we picked Spec Miata because it was the class that had the most entries.
Sure.
In our local area, it was Spec Racer Ford or Spec Miata at the time, right? And Spec Miata had a few more, so we jumped in and we purchased a used Spec Miata locally, and started running in 2005, and he got pretty good at it fairly quickly from his karting experience. But then, so in 2006 was the first year the Spec Miata was a national class, and so we had my brother lived at the time in Topeka, Kansas, and so we went back and stayed with them close to the runoffs that year, which were at Topeka Speedway, and went to the runoffs that year, and lo and behold, he ends up winning the thing.
Nice.
Right, in Spec Miata. So we thought we'd be a little bit competitive and maybe a top 10 or something, but ended up he was running towards the front the entire time and led every lap and won the thing going away, and so that was a big deal with the Mazda side, and that put him into the Mazda development program.
Sure.
And he ended up, we went raced on the what was then the Sirius Cup
Right.
what turned into the Playboy Cup the year after we left, but the MX-5 Cup cars, and with Mazda's help for the year, and you need to win to continue to move up, right? And he
Right.
finished second in the points. He won a few races, but virtually every track but Portland, it was a track he had never seen before. So it was a little bit hard, but the competition was pretty heavy, right? And so he finished second. So we had to figure out what we were going to do. And he got a ride in the Mustang Challenge Series the next couple of years, and he won the championship there both years. And then he started doing off-road racing, kind of a little bit of a full circle thing.
Right.
And raced off-road in the Traxxas Torque Series, which was in the Midwest, and did that for a couple of years, won a world championship back there in the pro light class, and did really well. And then he chose to kind of back away from some of the motorsports a little bit. I was looking for something to do at that point, and AIM called, and I went to work for them full time at that point. So it's been kind of a wild journey in the racer side of it, and now on the support side of it, and been doing that for about 14 years with AIM now.
Nice.
Traveling to racetracks, doing webinars, and doing on-site seminars, and just your general support and training for the product. So long answer to your short question, but that's it's been a long journey.
Yeah. Let's go back real quick, because we don't talk a lot about off-road trucks and stuff on the show, because obviously it's Inside the SCCA. But you did that here in Southern California, and I'm trying to do the timetable in my brain. There's a couple of pretty big names who moved on from trucks to go to other places. Did you ever race against Jimmy Johnson?
Raced in the same spot. He was always in a different class. Typically.
Got it. Okay.
When he was doing the trucks in the Mickey Thompson Stadium Series, I was in the buggies.
Got it.
But so got to know I know his brother a little bit and some others, but Jimmy did pretty well for himself coming out of the dirt, didn't he?
He did okay.
He did okay.
Yeah, one of my first broadcast jobs, my first network job actually, was installing cameras into Score off-road trucks. And I got hired because I knew my way around a race car, and I had some TV background, and I could get in and out of the trucks when I was a little bit of a tinier human being without damaging anything. They knew that I would know what not to touch.
There you go.
And we had to put these boxes in and then mount the cameras, and I had about 15 minutes in each truck to get it done. And then I had about 4 minutes in each truck to get them all out at the end of the day. Yeah. So it was quite the experience. But I've really enjoyed spending time at like Crandon and some of these places in Wisconsin. I was a Midwestern kid at the time, so that was a lot of fun. So
it's funny you say Crandon, but Andrew ended up winning his first race at Crandon in the pro light truck. But many years earlier, I ran my last race I ever ran was in what they called the Super 1600 buggies at Crandon. And the last race I ever did there was at the World Championship weekend in September.
Yeah.
And I finished in second place on the podium in the super buggy class. Yeah. So I enjoyed Crandon quite a bit. I got to race there. It was the only Midwest track I got to run on. Was Crandon though.
Talk about a little town that really embraces an event.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Crazy, great people. And, you're just in Road America and, and not too far away. I just love the Midwestern people. Just great folks.
Definitely. I'm glad to be from there. I'm glad I live here now. I enjoy going back to visit, especially in the summer. I'm not a big fan of going back in the winter, but it was a great place to grow up, and good opportunities were there as well. So I'm doing the timetable in my head. I'm going to guess you're kind of close to my age. So you said 15, 16 years ago or 14 years ago with AIM. Yeah. You were really on the front step of kind of data acquisition. At that point in time, and we've had a couple of other data guys on, if you weren't in Formula One or maybe IndyCar, there really wasn't much data acquisition going on. And I remember AIM being kind of like the first company, or one of the first companies, AIM and Pi Technologies, to put together a system that was not complete unobtainium for people like us in the grassroots motorsports. How early in AIM's world did you join AIM?
Join as a user was quite even a bit earlier, but there was I think in 1997, 1998, AIM AIM is an Italian company. AIM Sports that I work for is the North American importer. And so, but AIM created what they called a micron. And this was in 1996, 1997
Right.
timeframe. And it was right when my son Andrew got into karting.
Got it.
And so there was another company here that was actually based here in Washington called Digitron. Was just a TAC and an EGT and a TAC and one temperature kind of a gauge, right?
Right.
And that's what everybody had in karting. And AIM showed up with a lap timer and RPM and temperatures and speed. And this thing was like $500 at the time. $500 in '96 was a lot of money, obviously. Right. And I had been my job, my thing that I did for work at the time was in surveying, and the surveying had just gone through a change from theodolites and pulling chains and measuring everything with steel tapes to starting to measure things electronically with beams. So I had came out of the field office and into our support office at that time, and I was working my way up to head the entire department, and we were switched over to GPS at some point. But at the time that I was getting into the AIM and the karting one was right when we were getting into electronics and surveying. So I had this bit of knowledge of how to work with data collectors and data and bring it into software and work with it. So I just rolled that right over into our racing passion.
Right.
And what happened was, even though I wasn't a dealer for them, I was just a user. But here in the local area, there was 4 or 5 kart shops. They would sell a micron to somebody, and they would say, "Oh, go talk to Roger. He knows how to get it running. He's the guy that shows everybody how to get the information out of it." Right. So I became the local de facto expert on the micron, and then the folks in from AIM Sports, heard that there was somebody up here helping. I started doing some little seminars and bringing people together and sort of trying to do it during a race weekend, right? And started getting in the training side, and AIM just loved that and came up and offered to help us in any way I could to do that. And I started to travel to other parts of the country and doing it for AIM. And then when I decided I wanted a bit of a change, in work,
Right.
we chatted with them and went to work from full time, and then really spooled it up where I was on the road virtually every weekend somewhere, either a racetrack or a race shop. And so AIM came from that karting gauge, and then they slowly built up into the automotive world, right? So they took that technology, and it took 4 or 5 years to understand what the automotive side needed,
right,
and build something that was really robust and yet cheap enough for everybody to use. It is just a super powerful tool. You mentioned, you had the Indy cars and Formula One, and these, thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars for data.
Oh, probably millions,
and then
I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And then turned it around really quickly. Electronics worked this way, but it was turned around pretty quickly. And now you can get an AIM system to put into a car. It's one of our little Solos that it hooks up to your ECU, and for $700-800, you're off and running with a data system that is just an amazing thing.
Right. That first micron system didn't log anything, right? It was just like an electronic dash, right?
The very, 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 very first ones were just on board. There was no memory.
Right.
And then they came out pretty quickly. Within about 2 years, I think 98, they came out with the Micron 2.
Okay.
And the funny part is, it shows you how technology has changed. It had a couple of LED lights that were warning lights for high temperature or something like that. And the way that we would get the data off those was with a download pin, with an optical download pin. You had to put it over that light bulb, and it would flash lights, and the pin would go to a serial connector on serial port on the computer, and it was cumbersome at best, right?
I bet.
But it was the first time we were able to ever download data and actually see lap times and speed and all the other stuff, and it was fantastic.
When did you start trying to analyze the data to then help a driver either tune or figure out how to drive a better lap?
Well, because I was a racer before,
right? The
thing that wasn't always frustrating, but it was one of those things you'd think about, and boy, I wish I knew this, right?
I
wish I knew what to work on.
Sure.
And it had become clear to me at the end, when I was racing professionally, and then really trying to work hard and get better and get faster, right? And the pressure's on, and it was always we would go 3 or 4 races or something over a weekend, because in off-road in Washington, there's not a lot of areas to go and practice, right? The weather is sometimes poor. So so we would end up, it would take 3 or 4 races, and I would finally figure out something about the brake pressure bias, right? And then all of a sudden there was this huge jump in speed because of something that I would find. And that told me pretty quickly that it was like, wow, boy, I wish there was more. I wish there was a way to get information to help me understand what I needed to know, right?
Right.
And so when Andrew got into the karting and we started to do this, and now you're working with with an 8-year-old, and there's only so much feedback an 8-year-old can give you, obviously,
right.
And with junior drivers, and so then all of a sudden we could come in and look at the data, and we quickly moved up, and we had throttle position and and steering and all this stuff on the kart, and you would. You got to kind of go slow and everything, but it is nice to know if the driver is riding the brake, right? Or just little things like that. And so very quickly we transitioned from just looking at lap times to transition into, hey, there's some laps, there's some data here that might help us, and then being able to take a fast lap and then lay over another lap and say, why are we slower today? Is it the tires? Is it the motor? Is it the driver? Right. And we were able to figure that stuff out really quickly. So once you get a taste of it, and having that knowledge that helps you, answer these questions, track time is so expensive, and tires are expensive, and gas, that, boy, anything you can do to grab some data. People might, at first we balked against, spending $500 for the little data logger, but that's one trip to the track, right? In some cases. So it ends up being more valuable than one set of tires could ever be. So it ends up being saving money for everybody.
And at the grassroots level, if you're in IndyCar or any professional series, there are test days, sometimes multiple test days, although a lot of those have been cut back nowadays because of costs and everything. Yeah. But pro drivers get lots of time behind the wheel, compared to us, and to get any kind of way to maximize the short amount of time that we do have, I think sim racing has helped a lot in that. It gives you an opportunity. Obviously, it's not one for one. We have this discussion all the time, and I get roasted. It's not the same. Well, no, you're right. It's absolutely not the same. But it's repetitions. It's finding you ways to look for the same turn-in points, look for the same apexes, and hit them over and over and over again. And all that kind of stuff. Those are tools, along with things like the data logging, that help us who don't get to the racetrack as often as we would love to, and really maximize the time that we have, right?
I might surprise you a little bit here, but I might be on your side quite a bit. The sim racing side, there's that whole thing of learning the tracks and all the stuff that you just mentioned. But the all the main players in sim racing now, that we can grab the data file out of there and bring it right into our Race Studio software.
Right.
And what has been very, very helpful for folks that do want to learn even more about data, and maybe they want to be a data engineer, they want to be a crewman on the team, and they want to learn this a little bit, they can bring data out of their own sim rig and practice and do the work on that. So there's this whole nother level of sim simulation that's going on with it, right? That people are learning to use their data even better.
Right.
So we spent, when the pandemic hit, our software team in Italy really buckled down, and they spent 3 or 4 months focusing on getting that data to come in and out of all the sim tools and be able to do that, because that's what everybody was doing, obviously, at the time in the motorsports world. And so we built an entire process for the sim racing side. If you go to our website, there's an entire page on that and all the documentation for all the main players.
You've walked me right into the exact door that I wanted to walk through at the moment. Let me just say, we've got some folks watching. If you have questions, put the questions in the chat, and I will try to get as much of them to Roger as possible. Matt Romanowski is here in the chat. So the data off of a sim compared to what the data that you use, is that really close to real life data? So that, because I talked with an engineer in IMSA who's working with a young driver, and the engineer was so impressed with the amount of input going over the data what the driver was, and he said that he felt it was because the driver had spent a lot of time pouring into their data on the sim. So is that a situation where the sim is really close to one for one as far as something you can learn in the sim that you can bring to the racetrack?
Yeah, I did forget that point. You were talking about where is it one to one, and and boy, somebody like me or you, it's probably not one for one. When I sit down and do them, I don't have that feel, right,
Right.
that I am used to at my age. But you get the young folks that sit down in their sim rigs, and they pick up the breaking points, and they're hitting their apexes, and they're doing it all visually, and it doesn't come to me that way, right?
Right.
So there's a little bit of that. I think there is maybe a little bit of a generational thing there.
Sure.
But then when to go back to the data side, absolutely the amount of data that comes out of the sim programs, we had to set it up where when the AIM software, we had to create a toggle. Do you want all the data, or do you just want the average amount of data? And the average amount of data is more than virtually every car that I see actual data on, right? So there is a ton of data in there, and if you want it. But so because of that, young drivers are learning both sides of it. They're learning the driving side, they're learning the engineering side or the data side, and I think it's closer to one than a lot of people say.
Right. If we have an SCCA car and we're not part of Spec MX-5 where it's required, and we're not using some sort of a data logger. Obviously, you want people using AIM, but there's other options out there. If we're not utilizing that tool, how much are we giving away to the driver that is?
The drive, it depends, right? There's that answer, right? But there are drivers that put in, they'll spend $1,000 and buy an AIM system, stick it in the car, and it will be the world's most expensive lap timer, right? And
Okay.
and which is fine, and if that's what they want, that I have no problems. But so if you have a driver that is not going to see the value of it or take the time to use it, it is just another tool in the toolbox. If you purchase that wrench and you never pull it out of the drawer, it's just a wrench in the drawer, right? So the data is the same way. You need to jump in there and grab it. Maybe you don't do it after every session because you just don't have time. You're one person running your car. You gotta drive it. You gotta set the tire pressures. You gotta check the oil. You gotta drink some water in between, and you gotta get out there and race. Maybe you don't have time, which is fine. But maybe at the end of the weekend you download it, you take a look at it, and you look at your 4 times that you're out on the track, and you understand a little bit what you did on Tuesday night when you have a little bit of time,
Sure.
right? So is a person hurt by it? If they are using it and they don't, and if they are open to using it and would be using it, yeah, they're hurt if they don't have it. Just ask anybody that has a data system,
Right.
and they think it's in there, and they think it's all calibrated, and they think it's working, and a wire breaks on the outlap, and they don't have data. It's the worst thing in the world to a data person. Somebody that's used to getting data when they think they have it and they don't have it, and that will tell you just right away how much a person thinks that they is just clobbered when they don't think when they didn't get it.
Right. Matt asks, he's asking the data guy, do you like data or video better?
There's a, I was always, the video is the first layer in, right? If you have video, I see it as just another data tool, frankly.
Right.
And Matt maybe has heard me say that before, but I see data as some people learn visually.
Right.
And you can see a squiggly line, and I certainly can. I can see a squiggly line. I can see the lateral G's fall off in the middle of a corner or something. And that's hard to describe to some people early on in their data journey. But if you have the video playing right there next to it, or even by itself, and you watch the car go in, you see them hit the curb, and you see them having to catch the car a little bit with their hands that are part of the video, all of a sudden they know exactly what they did wrong, right? So what's one of the things that our new race, not new now anymore, but now 7 or 8 years old, but Race Studio 3 now does is we have our data, and then there'll be a window that you can just open up, and if you've used our camera, the AIM camera, and it was connected, and grab the data all at the same time, you've got video playing, and you scrub back and forth in the data, every foot or so, the video displays the next, plays right along. So you're getting the best of both worlds. And so some people, video is the best way to look at things for a while, and data might be the other way. And the other thing that is kind of cool about the SmartyCam software now is you pull that SD card out just like you would out of any other video camera, and you put it into your computer. All of the basic data elements have been transferred to the video file. So let's say you can't even get out to your car to download it, or you don't want to, or you just have the video and you're looking real quick. You've got speed, RPM, oil pressure, all the basic things are embedded into the video. So you have those data traces with your video file. pretty interesting process.
All right, before we get into Spec MX-5 and compliance and all of that, because I'm fascinated by that, by the way. Let me ask a question before it loses my mind, or it leaves my mind. We have obviously people inside the SCCA who watch us who are not just road racers. Is there an aim system that works in the autocross setting where you're doing just one lap at a time?
We have virtually all of our systems can do what we call point-to-point, races, whether that be autocross or hill climbs, right? Sure. But the autocross is a little bit different. We have been working on and thinking of ways to do it better and create a better process. But as of right now, we can do a start point, walk over with your solo before you start making your runs and make a finish point, and you will get a lap for every time you run your autocross. It's just not as simple as the road courses that are out there where we have permanent tracks where we go to, right? So there is a little bit of setup work that you have to do ahead of time, but all of our units will do point-to-point races.
Cool. That's for my autocross brothers and sisters out there who might be tuning in tonight. All right, so let me do this. We're about halfway in. Let me take a quick second here to thank the folks who helped me do this. Racekeeper, of course, is our official in-car camera of Inside the SCCA. They're good people there and love what they're doing, and they've got some new stuff coming out soon. I'll let you know about that as soon as I can talk about it in public. But that's going to be really cool. There, you can check those guys out in our show notes. Also, Solo Performance Specialties. They're the good people who are out here at all of the Solo National Tours, or at least most of the Solo National Tours and Solo Nationals. Great folks there. And if you're part of the Solo community, you don't have to catch them at an event. You can also go to their website and catch all of their information there. They do a lot of cool stuff. And, of course, Ray Esports is the official sim racing league of Inside the SCCA. And check out those. They have races on Tuesday nights, which I have another podcast, which is why I'm never there on Tuesday nights. But they also have their Weekend Warriors racing. And if you want to make sure that you won't be the slowest guy on the racetrack, come there for a race I'm in, and you will always have someone to finish in front of. So, anyway, the guys at Ray Esports are awesome, and check them out in the show notes as well. All right, so
I'm glad of that service you provide, Brian. That's a great service you provide. It's
fun.
Finishing behind everybody else.
I'm getting closer. These days. I don't get enough time. I don't have enough time to do it. Sim racing is just like anything else, and especially I think us older folks have a little harder time because I think the sim racers who start sim racing and then go wheel to wheel or any kind of real car racing have an advantage in sim racing because they aren't looking for the seat of the pants, which I'm just like, I want the car to step out and I want to know what's happening. And so I have that's my excuse anyway. It's from my drawer of excuses. So that's kind of how that works out. Okay. So, we have a new national class, Spec MX-5, started as a national class this year, and it was at the runoffs last year as what did we call it? I think it was called an exhibition or whatever it was. It was a non-national championship part of the runoffs. And I had Josh Smith on, and when we first started doing this, he was talking about this whole compliance thing that they were doing with AIM, and it sounded kind of cool, and I've learned a little bit more about it. So essentially, every single Spec MX-5 car that is SCCA legal has an AIM data logger, right?
Correct.
And at the end of every session at the Super Tours, all of the data from every one of those data loggers is downloaded, correct?
Downloaded and sent in.
Sent in. And you have somebody, is it you or is it someone else?
It's Justin, the series director.
Okay.
He's the one that grabs them, puts them out onto a server, and then me sitting right here where I am, starts receiving files and goes to work.
Okay. And the goal of this is to make sure that nobody has an unfair advantage, that there's no Team Penske, Mark Donohue unfair advantage going on. And I'm sure that is, there's a little bit of, is there a little bit of voodoo science into making sure that's the case? What are you looking at? You're not looking at how a driver drives, what the G's are. What are you looking at off the data to help make sure that Brian's car isn't inherently faster than Roger's car?
I'd be afraid if Brian was in the series that might be happening after chatting with you, right? But
Nice dig.
If I take a half a step back,
Sure.
the concept of technical compliance, in some ways has always been around,
Right.
and it came into my mind because I'm a data guy, and gosh, it's been 15 years ever since even before working with AIM directly. I was thinking about, there's all this electronics nowadays, and there's these processes that maybe they use. Maybe you go take it to a chassis dyno. Maybe there's sealed motors. Maybe there's all these different ways of trying to create parity, and then with electronics nowadays and other things, how do you know what's going on the track is exactly what's going on, as the cars left, right, and as the cars come off, there's times you have to worry about those kind of things. So I got to thinking, well, what's the best way to compare cars and understand what is going on? You can't trust the racer. I am one, and every racer out there will say they're being beat by horsepower, right?
Right.
And they truly believe it. It's not like that they're just saying it, right? That there's times when a car's pulling away, and there's all these things that are happening. So in my mind with the data loggers, it was, what's the best way to do this? And on track performance was always comes back to me being the place to do that. And when they're actually out there and they've got to put their best stuff on the line, and they've got to perform as best as they can. And if there's cheating that is happening, if we had a logger in every car, you could start to see the differences in the cars, right?
Right.
So I started to work with different groups and different people, and started talking about it, and I started building processes. This has been 10 years in the making of just trying different things, and starting off with just looking at a speed from one spot of mile per hour to another, right? And then trying to understand, well, how long did that take, and how fast was the car going, and compare that to the rest of the cars, and back, and then continued to fine tune that to some of the stuff that we have today. And so when it comes to the SMX class, Spec MX-5 class, a lot of those cars happened to come from the MX-5 Cup world, right, back then. And when Mazda was putting that whole thing together, they had spec'd AIM loggers in the cars. So, when we didn't chat about this as they had started to build this class, when Mazda and Justin and Sean and the folks started to kind of formulate some opinions on that they may wanted to do this, AIM wasn't a part of those discussions. But once they were going along, and they were having some bigger races, and they called me and said, "Hey, Roger, I've got some data files from these 3 cars, and we think one of them may have a little bit of an advantage. Would you look at the data?" Yeah, I'll take a look at it. No problem whatsoever. And so I started to do that, and then that whole thing just kind of just rolled over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, because the class has been slowly building, right?
Sure.
And so we started to do that, and then in their rule set, at some point a couple years into it, they wrote in there that, hey, everybody's got AIM, but any new cars that happen to be built must have AIM, right? Right. They didn't add any burden on anybody that was in it already. They just everybody, as you're building these, put an AIM logger in them.
Sure.
And because we're going to do our preliminary technical compliance checks with data, and so I've been working with them side by side for quite some time, and it's just built, and then the class has started to explode.
Right.
And so there became a time where we had to take some of the older systems away and bring in the newer ones, because some of the things that I do now, pretty involved. I sent you a little bit of a look at it, and we've talked about it a little bit. We'll talk more here, but there is a lot of automated processes that are happening, and some of the oldest data loggers that used to use Race Studio 2, that was a little harder to do in Race Studio 3. So this last year they added that this certain level of gauges that needed to be in the cars, and that, sure, there was, I think, only 2 that I know of, maybe 3 that had to be updated anyway.
Right.
But so now all the data comes in, and while the drivers are still sipping on water and trying to brush the sweat off their brow, I'm working away. And what's really interesting, you mentioned, do you look at the driver's performance? There comes a time when maybe I'll look at a little bit of that, but it's well down the road. But a couple things I do is we look at technical compliance as already spoken about a little bit here, performance in straightaway corners, top speeds, braking, and cornering. But then the other piece that I do that we really want to make this as an added benefit for the racer that's part of this class, that we're asking them to, number one, have a name logger in their car. Number two, take the time. I mean, they're on a 30-minute window that they have to get that data file off the car and sent. And so there's a little bit of a hassle factor for them.
Sure.
I really want to push to try to find some ways to have added value to them. So one of the things we've done and continue to do and do more and more of is we find trying to find ways to share information with them about their car. And so what we'll do is all this data I've got figured out some ways to quickly go in and be able to send them a screen capture of all the water temperature, the lambda sensor, all the particulars of the technical side of their car. And then all of the rest of the cars are in the list, and then I take a median value of all of the entire class. Right, this last race it was 44 cars at Road America. We take the median value from all of the cars, and we tell we're able to hand to every driver that wishes to have it. They know the median values for all the lambda values and battery voltages and water temperatures and oil pressures, and then we give them their car as well. So they're able to see that. And then the other side of that is the performance side. I'm checking third gear acceleration runs, fourth gear acceleration runs, top speeds, average top speeds over 4 or 5 laps, put all those into a chart, and then give them the class averages, the class median and their cars. So they know, hey, how does our car stack up? You know, if a team is looking at it and they think they're down on horsepower, they request their acceleration runs versus the class, and they actually we're about 500s better than the class average in third gear, and and our top speed is within half a mile per hour or whatever. And okay, let's not work on that. Let's work on this. Right? It's that whole thing about data. What you need to know what you need to work on, and if we can help them understand that their car is performing well and they need to work on braking or cornering or whatever it happens to be, it's a huge help for the competitor.
Wow.
And then finally and that's the biggest thing. And then we, as fast as I can also do it, if I'm looking in there and I see battery voltage that comes down to 10 volts all of a sudden at the last couple of laps, and these guys are out there running in huge drafting packs and all that, and the drivers may not have seen the low voltage, I get the information as fast as I can to the SMX team out there, and they go right over to the team and said, hey, the data team's looking at this. Looks like you have a battery voltage problem. Your lambda looks like it broke, and it may have hurt your performance. Your water temperature just shot up to 240 on the last lap. Things like that. Yeah. So there's a lot happening here, and we're trying to do as best to not only get technical compliance, but also help the competitors and give them this added value for what we're doing.
So this is kind of mind-blowing to me, because I honestly thought, just from the conversation that I had, that the goal was just to look for world beaters, to look for cheaters. But the idea that you're also trying to help out maybe a car that's slightly underperforming, get to where it needs to be to make it truly a driver class, where the difference is the guy behind the wheel or the gal behind the wheel. Or that you might actually find a potential problem in a car that's growing, or could become a bigger problem down the road. I mean, for a small team, some of these drivers are parts of big teams, and they have folks who could look at this stuff. But let's say you're a one-off, or you're a father-son team out there, like you and your son were, like me and my dad were, and we don't have a whole support staff. You kind of now have a little support staff in the back office in Washington helping you out. I didn't realize that was part of the process.
Yeah, we're not going to say we're going to catch everything, because 44 cars. I mean, it's hard, but I've created as many automated things as I can to catch huge over revs and things like that.
Sure.
We share those, but it's a mountain of information, right? That peak is looking for those folks that may be stretching the rules or trying to do some things. That is the paramount thing we're looking for, is to make sure the technical compliance there and that the parity is ensured, right?
Yeah.
So that is a number one. That is the first thing we look at. But once we get past that, and I've built a bunch of automated processes that are spitting information towards me to help me get there faster, then we start looking at these other things. And I'm going to tell you that there's probably been 5 to 7, somewhere in that area. I don't keep track, but of times when we were able to find something in the car, a broken wire or something that would have hurt the car, a bad speed sensor
Right.
that's going to hurt the ABS stuff. Text that information to the folks on the ground. They go right over to it, and then we've gotten an email message back later saying, yeah, we hadn't caught that. That's boy, thank him. That was very, very helpful. So those are things that we're doing quite a bit, and I find that to be the I'm a racer, right?
Yeah.
So anything we can do to help the racers and do our paramount role of making sure that of parity and equality in the class is important.
On the flip side, I guess, as a racer, maybe I'm hoping that you're going to come back and say, oh, there's a problem and it's the car. And when you realize that your car is just as good as everyone else's and you're just not driving well enough, that could be somewhat demoralizing also.
Not sure I've done that, but
but if you ask for the information and you provide the mean, right?
Yeah, the median.
The median,
mean,
and then my car is right at the median. Then I know that it's me, and not you don't have to tell me. I can figure that out on my own.
The funny part is we've had some team owners, maybe even some fathers, come back and we've chatted a little bit, right? And I've been working on something. We have not released a bunch of it yet. A couple of teams that have really asked for it, I've been able to show it to them, but we started off with just acceleration and the mechanicals, obviously, and then acceleration rates. And but the entire time, I have also figured out some ways to look at the efficiency of the braking, straight line braking, and also I found the carousel at Road America, right? I find the corner on whatever track we're running that has the longest time that the car is at the maximum G's in cornering, and I do timing and average G's in the corners and a number of things, the radius that the driver drove, and those are all in a nice little table. And hopefully this next race we will begin to release that bits of information to all of the teams. And what we have been able to do is look at. They come back. A couple of teams have asked, your car is performing well, but help your driver a little bit. Here's where I see it. It's in braking.
Right.
Your driver is out of the 44 cars here, and I rank them and I put them in a table and I sort by number 1 to number 44. Right.
Right.
Your driver is number 37 in braking, and so while keep them working on cornering and acceleration and focus on what you need to. But this is the area next time you go to work with your driver coach or we'll go to the track to work, be looking at your braking and start to improve that. I think that will help your lap times more than anything.
Matthias Guffrey, Roman, I'm going to butcher your name, Roman. I'm sorry. Roman Tigitor, and then Roaming Roman. So I've got a Matt Romanowski, a Roaming Roman, and a Roman Tegidor in the track. There's a lot of Romans. Next time we're going to get a bunch of Byzantines in here or something. Anyway, thanks to everyone being here. If you like what you're watching, smash that like button and subscribe. I'd appreciate that. If you have questions for Roger, please put those in the chat as well, and I will get them to him. We're already coming up on 45 minutes in, and I try to keep these to about an hour, Roger, because I tend to think people check out. I check out after an hour on a podcast or on a show. So, but I get the sense that you may have to come back for another episode down the road to do more of this, because this is a ton of fun for me. So
absolutely, me too.
So how many times have you found somebody cheating? Don't have to tell me who.
Cheating's a bad word, right? We may not call it that.
In excess of the parameters with which you are looking for. How's that?
Non-compliant is probably the word that the technical guys would like to use. There have been a few, but they've been small, luckily. Okay. I will also share that as soon as all racers are this way, it's not just the SMX class, but since this has been since its infancy, I think it's built the reputation. When somebody knows that they're looking at something as deeply as what we're looking at it, and as quickly, and you're getting, and every driver, every team that wants to look at it can get results and look at this. That thins down the people, the things that they're going to try to do, right? So there may be other things that they're doing that maybe or maybe don't show up very well in the technical data we look at. We may see some performance things; those are being shared. I'm going to share though that if we look at if you got 40 cars and you got the ones that have exit speed that's fairly close to the average of the class, the top speeds at the ends are the whole window there is 1 to 1.5 mile per hour.
Right.
And of every car that's out there running, it's virtually the same. So if somebody all of a sudden jumps up and all of a sudden there's 2 more miles per hour there,
and they stay on the racetrack,
I can quickly go look at the data and say, okay, well, why on lap 13 did they just run the, going into Canada Corner and they had 4 more miles per hour? Sometimes we can come up with those answers pretty quickly. You
Right.
look at intake air temperatures for drafts. You can look at video. I have gone back to and found value of going to your live feeds that you guys are running and go playing them back when you're running the SMX class and understand exactly where everybody's at, right? And be able to, okay, well, I think I see in the data that there was 2 cars side by side running up ahead, and then there was this guy who was in 3rd place that was about 100 feet back when they came out of the kink.
Right.
Huge draft, right?
Sure.
And I've seen some data from Daytona a little bit last year. One time, I seen 13 miles per hour gain in the draft with these cars. They are just drafting monsters. So some of that happens. And the other thing that we check every time that we haven't mentioned even yet is since everybody has to run the same tire, the same wheel, the same gearbox, the same rear gear, I've got a page set up that just checks out all the gear ratios. And there's advantage to different tracks running different gear ratios. And boy, that's another thing that we just check first thing is, hey, is everybody on the same gear ratio?
Right.
Nobody's changed 3rd gear. And so once everybody knew we were looking, I think that really thins down the folks that that might come into the class with the eye to be non-compliant.
So is non-compliance more often a mechanical mistake, or is it more often somebody trying to be tricky? Or
I've never,
in your impression,
as a racer, I never like to play in those areas where non-compliance happens. So I'm a little bit, it's a little outside of my element to do that. I do know we were caught on a couple things. We were found non-compliant once or twice in Andrew's career, and every one of them was a mistake, right? And you take your lumps, and I remember one time we had too much camber. In MX-5 Cup, and it was a bolt that was in there to hold the ball joint and everything. It had come loose. It had too much camber because we actually a bolt had stripped out.
Okay.
And Andrew was having trouble. He led most of the race. It was at Portland, a home track, and he had led most of the race and then lost the lead with a couple to go. He didn't understand it, and he said the car just went to junk. And then we got booted out of 3rd place finish because he was non-compliant on top of it because it was sitting there with too much camber. So mistakes happen. Is what I guess I'm saying, but. The racers are racers, and that's kind of their job a little bit. And there's the mentality always has been to get as gray as you can without turning black, and get outside of that black letter of the law. And so there's a little bit of that, but we can see some things that when you have this many cars and it is such a spec class, and if somebody's water temperature is 30 degrees below everybody else in the class, well, little light bulbs are going on, right? Why? Why did that happen? And then I immediately go to the tech guys and send notes, and that car gets pulled in, and the next time they come through, and they start looking at different things. So is it on purpose or not? I don't know. We're all amateurs on top of it, right? And there's prep, and maybe they just didn't read the rule book correctly. But we have to make it, parity has to be there, equality has to be there. So you're not trying to hammer them. You just want to get them back into the core of the program.
Right. I was looking behind me at my Carol Smith book, and I was trying to remember if it was Carol Smith or Smokey Unick or Carol Shelby who said something along the lines of, if you're not operating in the gray, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
So
all 3 of those books are right over there, by the way, in that little list.
Absolutely.
Carol Shelby and Smokey Unick.
That's actually, as much as I enjoy driving, I enjoy making cars go fast more than I enjoy driving. So that's why this conversation is so fascinating to me. And you were talking about when you find that 3 mile per hour speed difference going into Canada Corner, if it's followed by a 20 or 30 or 40 G impact, that may also explain the extra 3 miles per hour.
that is it's always a bad position to be in, right? There have been, there are times that cars either crash
Right.
or there's a mechanical of some sort, and I just know that's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
that team is going through, right? And yet we kind of want that data, and for Mazda's case, maybe something went with the engine or something,
Sure.
or whatever, and we really want to know why. And so typically they do send the data in, and I know that's hard, and it's super appreciative. We're not looking at it for the bad reasons of laughing at your pain.
Sure,
but
sure.
but we really want to learn from it, and when I do reports, every race weekend is followed up with a report, and if we see something that we start to see some trends on, we make sure everybody knows.
Well, and if giving that data provides information to help another team to not have to go through that again,
or even themselves, if they don't have a good data guy,
exactly,
and they ask, I'm happy to try to help them understand what happened as best I can too.
So we hear about, like, in IMSA, I'm most familiar with that series and how they do stuff, and I'm not even that familiar with that. But I always know that after the Roar, before the 24, they always do a balance of performance shift on some cars, and they say, well, we've gathered the data after the race. Is there any other series out there that's doing this every car in the field data collection after every single session, like it's being done at Spec MX-5? Because I mean, I don't even know that Pro Series do it that way, do they?
Typically, no. It's expensive to do. We're doing it on in a very inexpensive way because everybody has the data loggers and they're fairly inexpensive. But obviously, IMSA, I had John Doonan on our webinar series,
Love John.
Not long after the 24 hours at Daytona. And John, that was one of course, we're a data focused webinar, right? So we talked a lot about what IMSA is doing and their program, and he shared quite a bit. The other one that I'm confident that they're doing it, although they don't make a big point of it, is NASCAR. It obviously must be doing it. They've got that SMT data,
right? And
it's all being recorded, and every team can look at every other team, not only real time, but in the week after the event as well. So my guess is no doubt that somebody behind the scenes at NASCAR is doing the same kind of a thing and just making sure.
Right.
But they certainly had made a big deal out of it. So they're probably being on the QT and hey, we're starting to see something, and something you're doing here. Let's have a talk about it, kind of a thing.
Roman Tejedor, and again, I apologize, Roman. Roger, teacher of teachers. Thanks to the knowledge that he shared with all of us today, I can spread Race Studio 3 from Argentina through all Spanish-speaking kart people. How does that make you feel when you hear something like that? That's got to make you feel really, really good.
Those are the fantastic ones, right? Roman does write me emails, and he does visit a lot of our webinars that we're doing we do them on Tuesdays. And I love it when somebody has the desire to learn, as Roman does, and Roman has other jobs he does as well, right? So appreciate what Roman is doing. But when somebody has the desire to learn, I will sit down here and knock out some sort of a response or do a Zoom call with them, and anything we can do to help somebody that really wants to help themselves. That's the key. Sometimes it gets frustrating when you have somebody that's asking questions and they really just want you to give them the answer, and they're just going to close the computer and move on. You help those people, obviously, but boy, guys like Roman and many others,
right,
are fun to work with because they're just sucking it all up, and they're learning, and they're excited about it. It is how I am as well. This is what I love to do. You talk about we're 55 minutes into it, right? And I'm going, no, we're good. Let's go a couple more hours, right?
Yeah.
So because I really do love it, but I know people can't listen to this for that long.
Sure.
But Roman, thank you for being out there. Thanks for helping everybody in Argentina. I do appreciate it. Roman's in the karting world as much as for the most part. So
right. So with how was this idea, this concept? How was it accepted, or what was the feeling within the community? Because I would think that there'd be some people who really don't want to give up that information. Obviously, it's required. Was there immediate not compliance, but was there immediate acceptance of the idea, or has the idea become more and more appreciated now that people know how it's being used and what they can actually get out of it?
at least accepted, right?
Right.
The class has been built around it, so that has made that transition maybe a little bit earlier, easier. As people are coming in to get into the class, it's just a known piece of it, right? And that's the first thing. The second thing is I've been doing this a long time, and I am super happy to say that I've got a reputation. I think it's hard earned and well earned of privacy and that data. That there will not be anything shared, that it should not be shared ever. Right. And ever. And unless I ask, I do some webinars occasionally with the group, with the SMX teams that they come in, and I use John Davies is one that has given me a little bit of an okay to use certain files. And so I will show some things, but it's always with some permission. Because of that, everybody knows that their data is secure, and it's not going to be moved around and shared with anybody, number one. And number two is that second part that we've talked about a little bit here. We're doing everything we can to it's not a one-way street.
Right.
We're hoping to give them some benefit for what they're doing as well, for the data they're giving, that we give them something that adds value to their motorsports as well, especially for those young racers that are coming in. It is a development class for many of the drivers, and there's only so much you can do if you only have your own data, and being able to understand that your car is fast, or it's, you're good in the braking, but your corner speed is where your problem really is. That's helpful. You almost got a little bit of a driver in a PC box here, right? So a driver coach in a PC box. So I think that's a huge value for the series, and I believe that's why there's been so much buy-in into acceptance of it.
Right. We're running out of time, so I'm already seeing 2 more episodes. You sent me some screenshots that we didn't use tonight, and I'm almost glad that we didn't. I'm glad that we kind of kept this top level. And I'd like to do a second episode when we dig into more of the screenshots and look a little bit more at the data like we've talked about. I think that would be fun. And I also see maybe an episode, obviously these are required on Spec MX-5 cars, so all the people in that class kind of already know what's going on. But maybe an episode for someone who doesn't have a data logger now, who might be thinking about getting their first one. How do you get it going? What is that first piece of data that you should be looking at? That kind of thing. So maybe we got 2 more episodes. Maybe we do half an episode on each of those things. But I'd love to have you back on the show and do that again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what I do, right? So anytime, anywhere. The other thing I'd like to make sure that I share is AIM's commitment to this. I'm just the guy that works for them, right? AIM has gone out of the way to make me available to put in the number of hours that needs to be done for this, and what are there, 44 cars or something like that, and I don't come super cheap. So AIM has invested a lot to make this happen. They're supporters of amateur racing. They love that people are out here doing this, and they want to give back as best they can as well. And for them to allow me to do this has been pretty special. And we devote a lot of time to it and a lot of energy. And then we have staff at the tracks to help out. Certainly, we spend some time at the SMX paddock area, but they're there helping everybody. We'll have an AIM tech or 2 at virtually every event. We'll have at least a couple at the SCCA runoffs coming up. So thanks to AIM for everything that they do and allow us to do these kind of things, and that's been very, very helpful.
Is there contact information that you can share with us, or share with
just aimsports.com is to go to the website, and everything is there. We talked about sim racing. There's an entire page on that. Information about the webinars that I give, 2 Tuesdays a week that we started those March of 2020, end of March, right when the pandemic started, and we haven't stopped. I think you mentioned 170 something for years, and we're having number 178 a week from yesterday since the pandemic. So we're right there with you. So
that's awesome. All right, that's going to do it for another episode of, there's a button here I'm supposed to press, of Inside the SCCA. If you like what you're hearing, please like and subscribe. That would be awesome. To the RacingWire Podcast Network, if you're listening on the listening side. If you're watching on YouTube, it is the Racing Network. Pop on that as well. Follow us on social media to find out who our next guest is. Leave a question on Twitter. It's at RacingWireNet. There is a new Inside the SCCA every week. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a fantastic weekend. Stay safe and go play with cars.
I'm Dorsey Schrader, and when I'm on my way to Embrace, I'll listen to the SCCA podcast Inside the Short Bus.
Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the RacingWire Podcast Network and Rule 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests and not that of the SCCA.